All right. Hello, everybody watching this on replay. I'm just waiting for Ash to join or to request to join. And also, yeah, if you're watching this on YouTube, it's this way because we only filmed on Instagram, so it'll be the whole black on the sides. So sorry about that. But hopefully the conversation is good enough that you'll want to listen even though it's not pretty. So yeah, we'll just wait a few seconds for Ash to join and then we will get started. Making sure that I actually know how to invite someone onto my thing. All right, she is here. Let's see. Perfect. There we go. See if that works. All right.
Hi.
Hello. How are you?
Hanging in there.
Hanging in there.
Posting my stories. This is my response to every question of how are you lately is hanging in there.
I think that's a good response, especially given all the things that exist in the world right now. And especially if you're dealing with the black lung. Are you dealing with the black
No,
lung?
not right
No.
now.
Okay, good. Good. All right. I'm going to do a little intro to the video. I'm going to intro you, I'll intro me, and then we'll get started. Okay?
Sounds good.
All right. So, hello. Welcome to today's live where we're going to be talking about spiritual abundance because I think this is one of the things in the spirituality, self-help, personal growth worlds that has kind of gone like way off the rails. And I think that talking about it and exploring it and seeing where we can find a balance with, wanting to have nice lives and wanting to have nice things and to be paid well for the work that we do in the world, with understanding how systems work and understanding how our impact is in the world and all of these things. And then just quickly before we get into this, I just want to say that, talking about things like money and abundance and the system and all that stuff, it can bring up a lot of guilt and it can bring up a lot of shame. And I just want to say, this isn't to guilt or to shame or to blame anyone, because none of us alive today invented the systems that exist, and we didn't opt into them, right? Like, we were born into it, we were trained that this is how life is supposed to be, and so just consider this, education, and when we know better, we do better. So this is Ash, and she is a trained journalist and a marketer with over 15 years experience. She's currently working as a marketing director and science editor in higher education. And she does not consider herself a coach, but she very much considers herself someone who understands business and who sees the problems that are going on in the current kind of like spirituality, marketing, business world, and wants to work for a better paradigm. And so I invited her on here today because if you follow her, and if you don't already follow her, you definitely should go follow her. In her stories and in her posts, she gives a lot of really, really good just insight into what's going on and like the psychology behind business and why we're doing what we're doing. And she's really, really, really good at looking at systems and then making it kind of understandable so that we can be like, oh, okay, this is what's wrong with this and this is what we can be doing instead. So that's why she's here, and she's really, really great. So again, I highly recommend that you go and follow her and, yeah, learn from her because she has so much information. And then if you're not familiar with me, my name is Allie, and I am a self-love coach of the last 15 years. And my work is really focused on helping people like see the systems for how they are so that we can step out of shame, so we can step out of guilt, so we can step out of all the ways that our system trains us to hate ourselves and to be people who believe that our entire purpose in life is to consume and produce. and so that we can like find actual reasonable ways of being that are sustainable for ourselves and sustainable for others. So if you want, you can check out all of my content. I have a lot of free content up on YouTube, on Instagram. I have a mystery school, which is a step-by-step guided program to help you reconnect with your feelings, reconnect with your emotions, reconnect with who you are outside of this paradigm, so you can figure out a way of life that works for you. Okay? So yes, and then today we're going to be talking about the abundance paradigm and kind of like how so many spiritual people out there are telling us that if you're living your purpose and you're doing what you should be doing, you should be charging ridiculous amounts of money, and you should be manifesting wealth in the way that we define it in the Western world, which is like luxury and excess, and that if you're not doing that, you're not really living your purpose. So I'm going to turn it over to Ash for a sec, and I'm just going to say, what are you seeing in the industry, like especially spirituality, personal growth worlds, that you're saying, you know, I think these are red flags and we need to examine this?
Everything you just mentioned. I mean, it made me think of a post that someone shared in a group that I'm in the other day. It was just like a screen cap of another coach's post, and it was kind of like something along the lines of, this year we're going to see healers becoming millionaires and yada yada yada, and I'm so tired of seeing healers accepting scraps. And like my immediate thought was, that's a binary. It's either
Right.
you're a millionaire or you're accepting scraps. Like there's a whole spectrum in between there that you just glossed right over. But setting those things up as a binary is good for marketing and good for to sign up for your program.
Right.
So, you know, you're going to see a lot of sort of like logical fallacies like that in a lot of the marketing that's out there, because it is intentionally designed. Sometimes it's not intentionally designed. Like we are naturally conditioned to think in binary terms anyway, especially people in Western cultures. But people also do that as a means of sort of like hyperbole and to exaggerate the consequences or the options in order to persuade you to join a program.
Right. And so the big problem with that, right, is that it glosses over the middle where we find our enough. Right. And that kind of being the thing that I feel like people in the Western world are really struggling to understand, that we do live in a world where a lot of people feel like if I'm not continually reaching for more and more and more and more, I'm going to be poor. I'm going to have nothing. It's going to be like, these are the only two versions of reality that exist. And I also think that we're really trained and conditioned that to be in the middle is not okay. It means like you're not reaching your potential, you're not fulfilling your purpose, and you're doing something wrong.
Well, it's really interesting because that also sort of like mirrors our class system too. Like the middle class is disappearing, and it is very slowly becoming this binary. Either you are a have or you are a have not. And more and more and more people are actually struggling. So, you know, I think it's also tapping into this fear that people have, and this feeling that a lot of us are actually experiencing, especially like millennial generation. We're in a place where this stuff is a very real concern. And so that makes it a very easy fear to manipulate by making really big, outlandish promises about results and, you know, your way out. And I think it's always really interesting because, you know, you hear a lot of people in the activist world talk about, you don't really want money, you want freedom. And that is really the thing that I think everyone is seeking, is more time, more space for themselves,
Right.
and a reprieve from constantly having to be in the grind.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I was going to say too, is this is why I would hope that no one listening to this ever feels like guilty or shameful, especially if you've been pursuing that, like, lots of money and all these things. Because again, like, our entire culture, it's literally everywhere, that if you're not pursuing higher things, if you're not going for the bigger thing, you might end up not having enough
Or
and not being
easy,
okay.
or you're a failure, or
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
there's a lot of other things beyond just the fear
Yeah.
of scarcity underneath there too. There's a lot of shame thrown around toward people
Yeah.
who don't have the ambition to become a millionaire.
And I think that this was kind of the thing that I really wanted to point to in this conversation, was that shame and that guilt, that a lot of the time these marketers who are marketing that, like, you're supposed to be a millionaire if you're doing the right thing, don't realize that they are absolutely a part of the very systems they're trying to say that they are antithetical to in their spiritual and in their self-help work.
Mm-hmm.
That they're literally leaning on the exact same shame, guilt responses of, like, you are going to be kicked out of the tribe, right? Like, because that is how we really get manipulated into doing anything. I think the deeper manipulation that is constant in our culture is, you are not going to be included, you're not going to be accepted, you're not going to be good enough if you're not playing the game and if you're not doing the thing. Because we live in such a hyper individualistic world where we're continually like, you're going to get left behind, you're going to get left behind, you're going to get left behind. And that is how everything is sold to us. Like, everything is a trend, everything is in today, out tomorrow. You have to be on top of it 24/7. And if you're not, that real deep fear is that we're going to be left out, we're going to be isolated, we're going to be alone, which is ironic or whatever, because the system is inherently set up that we all feel really alone and we all feel really isolated. So then they can continue to market, well, you got to do better, you got to fit in, you got to, and then you're just more and more and more giving your entire humanity to this system that says you are here to produce and you are here to consume. And those are your two ways of being that you're allowed to be.
Yeah. I had this whole conversation with my boyfriend, like, just the other night. He was talking about how, it's like you could lose everything at any moment and be destitute. And that's what, like, drives so many people to just, like, keep working themselves to the bone. And yeah. I was talking about how that's only true here because we are such an individualistic culture that we don't live with a communal sort of setup anymore. Like, in other cultures, the whole family lives in together in one household. So it's like, if one person loses a job, it's not the end of the world because there are other people there supporting. And then, in other Western societies that are a little more socialist, like, you have the social safety net, so it's not as big of a deal if you are out of your job. But here, it's like, every man for himself, dog eat dog. If you can't take care of yourself, you're screwed. But at the same time, people will shame you if you can't take care of yourself either. So it's like this super duper focus on being self-sufficient.
Yes.
And that is not the way it is in other places, and that's not the way it's always been here necessarily.
That's true. Yeah.
I think we're more and more and more hyper individualistic in that regard, as time goes by. Right.
And we're sold that individualism is freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're sold that, like, like because you are an individual who could, if you work hard enough and do the right things, become a millionaire, become a billionaire. That's the freedom. That it's every man has the opportunity to make whatever they want for themselves. But the problem is that that's a lie. That it's not that everyone has equal opportunity to make money. It's not that everyone has equal opportunity to become very, very wealthy. Like, we live in a classist society where things are set up where you're kind of born where you're born within the class structure. And leaving that category of where you were born is very, very, very difficult. Mm-hmm. Right? And so I think, especially in the spirituality and the self-help world, there's such a juxtaposition of people saying they want to be a part of community and they want to be positive and they want to help people and they want to do all this stuff, and then marketing the spiritual abundance thing, where I think a lot of the time they're not seeing that these two things are mutually exclusive.
A lot of people don't actually have a really deep understanding of what community is.
Right, exactly.
Because, again, we don't live in a communal society like that necessarily. Yeah, right. And so I think a lot of people here are trying to find that. Yeah. And they're trying to create it, but they don't actually really know how to go about doing it. And so what they end up building are these very, like, inauthentic, surface level, fake communities. Yeah. Where everything is really shallow and superficial. Yeah. And they are completely missing. It's a surface level type of community that lacks the actual emotional connection and bonds. Yeah. That are the foundation of what community actually is.
Yeah. And I think that again, right, is because we're trained. We're literally trained that the whole point of your life is to consume and produce, to be a good consumer and to be a good producer. And in order to have that in our culture, I fully believe that you have to be, like, disconnected from your emotions and disconnected from so much of your humanity, because you have to be putting on a good face all the time. Like, even the way I asked how you were doing and you said, I'm hanging in there, like, that requires a level of vulnerability that most people would never say that.
I know. I've always been that way. Like, when people ask me how I am, I'm very honest about it. Yeah. But if you look at the story I posted in my stories earlier tonight, it's like Midwestern speak, and the last one is like hanging in there. It means literally hanging on by the thinnest thread in the universe. Yeah. Right? It's kind of like even that is a little bit like kind of brushing it off, but yes.
Yeah. But I would just say that, right? Like, most people would never answer like that. And so when you're saying, like, people are creating these very superficial communities, they are making community around their production or around their consumption. And it's all for an image to hopefully increase their own personal wealth. And
I mean, I see this in the spiritual, like, coaching world for sure. Like, you see all these Instagram influencers get together and they're all friends and they're sharing their photos, and it's like, I have the best friend group ever, and it's like the most shallow group of people you've ever seen in your life. Yeah. And it's all people who are, like, totally, completely, and utterly just disconnected from their body, would not really understand true connection at all. And, like, the minute anyone in that group has an issue, it will completely implode and fall apart. Right. Because it's all for show. It really is all for show. It's like, look at my elite group of friends. Yeah. And people that I hang out with. It's lifestyle marketing. That's all it is. It is lifestyle marketing and networking. Yeah. Based on the facade of friendship.
Exactly. And again, right, it's so much, this is another thing that I talk about a lot in my content, is that, like, our culture is set up for how things look and not for how things are. And we live and die by this, of just, if it looks good, if it looks like the thing it's supposed to look like, we're sold. And we're not trained to look beneath the surface of like, okay, but what's actually going on there, right? Like,
that's why so many people get to a point where they have achieved all the
yeah,
things that they've been told that they're supposed to achieve,
yeah,
and still deeply unhappy.
and I think this is why, yeah,
I was that person at 35.
yeah,
I had the house, I had the car, I had the job, I had the marriage, I had everything that, you know, society told me was what I was supposed to want,
yeah,
and supposed to make me successful, look successful. And I woke up one day and I looked around at my life and I felt like none of it belonged to me, because
right.
it was based on somebody else's values, somebody else's idea of what would make me happy, not my own. I had no clue what was really important to me until that very moment. And what was important to me was deep emotional connection, and I did not have it.
Yeah.
I was surrounded by people who could not actually emotionally support me. Yeah. And I was starved for that connection.
Yeah.
And I made the decision to just like scrap my whole life and start over. But I started over on my own terms. Yeah. And went out and sought people that I actually truly deeply connected with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now like my whole life is completely different. Yeah. But I am such a better place than I have ever been in my life. I can actually say that I am happy. Yeah. Now. Like I think there's certain people will say, and I have said this, it's like I'm the happiest I've ever been, but that's when you know you've never really actually truly experienced happiness, so everything's just not shitty. Yeah. So yeah. I'm the happiest I've ever been. No, I'm actually happy. Yeah.
Yeah. And so for you, that happiness came from looking for how things actually are versus how they look. Like you realized that, you know, and I think that this is something that it can be like hard to wrap the mind around, but it's kind of true, that all the spiritual marketers and all the spiritual seekers and everyone who, okay, one second, we got a comment here. But it's sometimes hard not to fall in the pit of fantasy. Any advice on how to keep the balance? Yes. Okay. I think this is what I want to talk to like right now, is we need to just pull back and understand, okay, what are we seeking when we're seeking spirituality? And what are we seeking when we're seeking wealth? Because, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so this is another really big thing that I have noticed just from like working with people one-on-one over the years. A lot of people have no idea what their needs are.
That's right. Yeah.
They're so disconnected from themselves and their bodies that if you ask them, like, what are your emotional needs? They can't answer the question, especially men.
Right. Right.
And so it's like, where do you even start with what you were just talking about when you have no idea what your needs even are?
Because this, I think, is the whole, like, if we can understand this that I'm about to say, I think this whole thing will make a whole lot more sense, right? So I think what we need to really understand is when we peel back the layers again, when we're like, I'm seeking spirituality, I'm seeking wealth, I'm seeking all these things, seeking, why? And what you just said. Okay, what do you want? Like, what do you actually want and what do you actually need? And then people being like, I don't know. Because, and this is my theory on it. From the very beginning of our lives, when we are children in our caregivers' homes, the first like nervous system program we get, because again, like our conscious mind isn't fully developed yet. Our frontal lobe isn't fully there. We're not fully online. And we're also in that like trance state where we're just taking in information. The reality of that situation is, from our perspective as children, the more we are accepted and loved and approved of by our caregivers, the more our needs are met. Mm-hmm. Because we don't have the capacity to understand our needs. We don't have the capacity to meet our own needs. And from our perspective, our caregivers have access to everything. Like they are like the perfect God. And it appears to us in that childhood state that the thing that is determining whether we're getting our needs met or not is how our caregivers are responding to us and our behavior. So like that's our fundamental worldview. When I am loved and when I am accepted, I feel good, because that's what happens when our needs get met. We feel good. When I am disapproved of, when I am rejected, when I don't receive that love, caregivers pull away or they yell at me or whatever, and I feel bad. And then we grow up, and most of us are never really trained out of that. We just start to integrate to all of the cultural and other societal rules that everyone else is following, of just follow along with the crowd, do what everyone else is doing, continue to just seek this approval, continue to seek love from outside of yourself, because that's the answer to getting your needs met, right? Like one of the biggest, most popular things that people are talking about in social media right now is like codependency, and the fact that so many of us are so deeply codependent because we don't know how to communicate our own needs. We don't know how to communicate, listen to other people and what they want and what they need, because what you just said, most of us don't even know. We're all just trying to be what each other wants each other to be, because we think then you're going to be my perfect savior who fixes everything for me. And I think a lot of the time this is also what we're seeking when we're seeking spirituality. We're seeking like the law of attraction, right? Like if I just get my behavior right, Sky Daddy is going to give me all the things and save me from all the things. And like my role in this is to like get my behavior right. And then we have so many spiritual teachers being like, right, like your world is only because of you. And if you aren't manifesting what you want, and if you're sick, and if you're whatever, what are you doing wrong? And everything is sold to us based on this idea that if you just perfect yourself, if you just perfect your behavior, your life will be perfect. Because we're not seeing that that's the childhood perspective. If I just do the right things and perfect my behavior enough, caregivers will love and approve of me, and then they will give me everything. And then we're just projecting.
It's all one big attachment trauma, and all we're doing is projecting our childhood attachment trauma onto this version of God.
Yep, which is could literally, like, our version of God could be money. It can be, normal culture. It can be any version of God that you think that you have to appease in order that it will love and bless you. It's all the same projection. And so when we start to realize that it's like, okay, approval isn't the thing that gets my needs met. That can be a byproduct of it sometimes, but that's not the one-to-one direct relationship with reality that I need to have to understand my own needs and to understand what I actually want, and even to understand my pain. I need a clearer view of what reality is than who is disapproving of me. But we have to understand that every single time we feel pain and we don't understand where that pain is coming from, or we have a desire for something and we don't have like a clear how I'm going to get that, we're all triggered into thinking, okay, where am I doing something wrong? Where am I being rejected? Where am I not living up to societal standards? And that shame that we have and that guilt that comes with I'm not living up to standard, I'm not doing the right thing, that gets triggered by every marketing that tells us we should be more and should be doing better all the time. That shame is a protective mechanism that we developed in our childhoods because we needed some sort of like boundary system to make us do the things that were going to get us accepted, even when those things didn't feel good to us. And to make us not do the things that were like normal to us or felt good to us that got us rejected. We had to have some sort of like emotional boundaries, and that's where shame and guilt came from. It's like this trigger of like, I'm going to protect you from yourself, and I'm going to get you to do the thing you need to do to be approved of, because that will help you survive. So now,
for a lot of people too, though, I think, especially, people who grew up in an abusive household,
Yeah,
our parents pushed their own shame onto us.
that's correct.
And
Yep.
so much of the shame that we carry is not ours.
That's right. And I would even say all of the shame that we carry is not ours, because shame and guilt don't account for if our behavior is actually harmful in some way or if it's actually helpful or whatever. It's literally completely based on, does it get you approved of or does it get you rejected?
Yep.
And in so many ways, like when you say our parents pass their shame down onto us, I think what that a lot of the time really looks like is they took on a worldview of who they were supposed to be good enough. And it fit the context of the time or whatever. And then they projected all that fear of, like, if my child doesn't do these things, they're going to get rejected. They're not going to get what they need. And it's like this kind of twisted way of trying to...
Or it's going to reflect badly on me as their parent.
Exactly. One of us is going to get rejected. And so it's all just coming down to, am I approved of or am I not? And so then we look at the spirituality world and the self-help world, and we're seeing all these leaders and these people who are teaching this abundance, and you can really just see that, like, they're teaching that because it's what's going to get them approved of, right? Like, so much of it is literally just them seeking an audience and saying to the audience what the audience wants to hear. And it's this complete weird, like, snake eating its own tail situation.
It's a little bit like narcissistic supply.
It can be, right? And to even look at that, right? Like, that, a narcissist is someone who doesn't know how to deal with their shame. Like, someone who literally does not know how to say, I can do a bad thing, or I can be harmful, or people cannot like me, but I'm still a good person and I'm still worthy of love. And I think this is, like, the big thing that I try and teach in my self-love work is we need to be able to understand that all of us are causing harm, and all of us are making mistakes, and all of us are doing shitty things, and that none of us are bad people who do not deserve to be loved, that these two things are two separate happenings. And if we are going to be spiritual people who really want to make the world a better place, we need to be able to admit where we were indoctrinated into shitty systems and we're participating in it, and maybe we can change. Like, to me, that's real spirituality, is tools to help us become less harmful without going into shame and blame, or without having to ignore everything to feel like we're okay, right?
Yeah.
And so I think if we can really understand that, again, so much of this is coming down to just, we need to understand what we actually want and what we actually need, and how that is being manipulated in our current culture, if we're going to break out of these paradigms that tell us you have to be rich in order to be okay. Because here's the thing that I want to back up, and I'm just going to hand you the mic for a sec. What is wrong with seeking wealth and luxury and abundance and excess by a Western standard? Like, why is that not okay, or why is that not spiritual?
Because, well, I mean, why is it not okay and why is it not spiritual are two different things.
Okay.
But why is it not okay? Because when you're seeking those things, we live in a world with limited resources, okay?
Yeah.
And in order for you to have more, someone else has to have less.
Yeah.
I don't care what the manifestors tell you. Money does not poof out of thin air.
Yeah,
Money
exactly.
is a promissory note that is exchanged for labor,
Yeah,
or resources. There is some kind of physical, tangible thing,
yeah,
that underlies money. Now, the value of that physical, tangible resource and that labor is completely subjective.
that's right.
How much money that's worth, we made that up.
Yeah.
Money itself is a construct, right? So value is relative, money's a construct, but the physical reality of the resources and the time and the energy that underpin it are very real and very limited.
Yeah.
Now, to that point, you know, we talk about abundance, about there being infinite abundance. In a way, there is. Nature is regenerative. But the problem is that we use those resources faster than than nature is able to regenerate itself, and that's why we're experiencing climate change.
Right.
We live in an ecosystem where everything's connected, and when one thing gets out of balance, the whole system becomes unbalanced.
That's right.
So you know, the whole thing with capitalism is that it revolves around this primary objective of endless consumption and growth. And in a world of limited resources.
That's correct.
It's going to break down eventually. So, I mean, this is just logic. This is not anything else. No, and not to shift to spiritually. For one thing, you know, from the Buddhist standpoint, like this need for wealth and material things is rooted in desire, and the whole nature of desire is that it's insatiable. And that itself is also endless consumption and more and more and more and more, right? And, you know, for me, spirituality has always been about collective liberation. Like it's been about using spiritual tools to self-examine the programming that you were given as a child. This is the system, your belief system, and your beliefs about the world around you, and how those collectively work together to create the society that we live in. Society itself is a construct. We made it all up, guys. And
exactly.
Made it all up, we can unmake it and make it into whatever we want. But we have to become self-aware enough to realize where we've been indoctrinated into this culture. And then begin to sort of dismantle and deconstruct those things internally. You know, a lot of people who are anti-capitalist will say things like, it takes too long for people to unravel their beliefs. We need policy change. And it's like, well, you can't get policy change until you get people to unravel their beliefs. So like it all back to the internalized systems, the ways that we internalize the systems. So, you know, we have to think about those things, because if we don't and we try to build something else, we'll just end up recreating the same thing all over again. We still haven't examined our underlying values that are what drives this whole thing anyway. Right. And so all this comes back for me, and because I do have a background in marketing and branding, is like it comes back to this question of what are your values, and values are deeply connected to your needs. So it's like, okay, we can, if you asked it, just like when you ask people what their needs are, if you ask them what their values are, they also can't answer the question. Most people don't know what their actual values are. It is easier for people to tell you what they don't value than it is for them to tell you what they do value. So you can back into it that way. What you hate. But you know, it's all of this is like this deep sort of examination of our relationship to self and and our place in it all.
Exactly. And I think we also have to realize, that like on some level, I think we all feel what we want. Like what you were saying is like there's an awareness of like we want connection and we want safety. Like that's really, I think, what we're all going for when we're going for wealth. Exactly. And then I think there's obviously for a lot of us like a deeper, more like, you know, I want to express something, I want to do something, like there are definitely people who have like a spiritual passion or a passion or some sort of purpose or something that drives them that they want to do and that they want to create. But I also think that a lot of people either don't really have something like that. Like that, I don't think that we're all born with like this one specific thing we're all supposed to do with our lives. I think some of us have that, but I think a lot of us, again, we can be relatively happy doing quite a few different things.
Well, I think again, like, especially for us in a capitalist world, so much of purpose to us revolves around career. And
right.
That's not what purpose is. So I'm also a hobbyist astrologer, and I make this point, like the 10th house in your astrology chart rules your legacy and life purpose. And like almost every astrologer interprets it as your career.
Yeah.
That is such a narrow way of viewing legacy and life purpose.
Yeah.
I had a lady a long time ago. She did a hand analysis where she like takes a print of your hand and then she like reads the lines and the whorls and all this stuff. And I loved the way that she defined purpose. She defined it as a consciousness you long to inhabit.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that leaves the door wide open for a lot of different ways of being.
Yeah.
That don't necessarily boil down to I have to change the world, or I have to like have this brand purpose, or I'm supposed to be a CEO or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
Being a mother could be someone's purpose.
Absolutely.
Being an artist just for your own enjoyment can be your purpose.
Yeah,
it
exactly.
Doesn't have to be, you know, this big thing that, I mean, I think we all make our own contributions to the world in very, very small ways. Changing those beliefs, examining those beliefs, and then changing your behavior in relation to them is your contribution to the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, and that's like the point of why we have all of these conversations, is because in real reality, we are not what we consume and what we produce. That's what we've been trained to see ourselves as, and that is how we have been trained to relate. So this is why we all feel so empty all the time, because we're not.
So many ways we look at, speaking to the relation, in so many ways we look at other people in terms of what can they do for me.
That's
not
exactly, like literally we are in a codependent relationship with literally everyone almost all the time. We are either looking at what can I do for them so that they will love and approve of me, or what can they do for me? Because we are so trained that, again, your value, meaning what society is going to give you in terms of how much safety and resource you are going to have access to, because I think that's what we mean when we say how society values people. It's how much resource are we going to give you, and how much safety are you going to have access to as a human being based on where you are in the class system. So we are constantly made to see ourselves through this view of like, how am I producing and how am I consuming? And how is that going to be reflected back to me in what I have access to in terms of being able to be safe? And so when people are going for abundance, I think a lot of the time what they really mean is, if when I get rich enough and when I get wealthy enough and whatever, I'm going to have the safety that I've always wanted, that I didn't know how to create and I don't know how to create in any other way than just having a whole bunch of stuff. And people are going to like me and I'm not going to be alone anymore. And then you get there and
hollow, because the only thing people are interested in is your money.
Exactly. And so
and being in proximity to your power, they don't actually care about you as a human being.
And this is why I always say that this spirituality abundance thing, it's never going to satisfy you, because it can't, because it doesn't address what you actually want and what you actually need, which is, so again, when we're talking about not going after abundance, we're not saying go be the poor Buddha who gives everything that you have away and starve to death, because that is the flip side of the same coin. What we're saying is that a true spiritual society is one that understands what actually has value. So to flip basically the script of what we have, is to say that if we had a healthy society, we would view life as being the thing that is inherently valuable. And then we would measure the systems of consumption and production against how well it supports the most amount of life, including earth, including animals and nature and resources. Mm-hmm. But what we have right now is an indoctrination that the thing that has value is the systems of ever expanding consumption and production. And human life, all of life, is meant to sacrifice itself to fit into that system as much as possible, and then you might be rewarded with the things that you need to survive. It's a completely codependent relationship we have with the system itself. And then we're trained to continue to play into it via constantly being triggered into fear and shame and guilt, that you're going to get kicked out, you're not going to have enough, you're not doing enough, you're not enough in any way. And therefore, we're all scared all the time that if we don't keep going and don't keep doing it, we're not going to have enough and we're not going to be safe. And for a lot of us, we actually aren't. And so we need to also realize that the more people are going for more than they need, the more we're feeding into the system where inherently people then have to go with less than what they need. It can't be no other way. That's how wealth was created. Excess wealth, from the very beginning of excess wealth being created, was the owners of the means of production artificially inflating the cost or the value of their good while not paying their workers a fair wage for the production. That's how there's excess wealth left over. Because in real reality, if everything was just weighed by its actual value, there would be no wealth. It would just be, I do this, it produces this much actual value in society, and then in exchange for that, I am given the other things that I need. There would be no things left over. Does this make sense?
I don't necessarily know that it's an exchange. Like, it's just like, I make a contribution, you make a contribution, everything.
We all get our needs met. Yeah. And that's what
purpose, and then that's just the way that we go. I mean, that's how, that's how the ants live, that's how the bees live, that's how nature.
There are human cultures that live this way, that understand that we work for a means to an end, to achieve getting us enough resources and access and safety so that the community can function, and then that's it. So question, people always ask me this: what is real reality? Outcome is real reality. Because as much as we're saying, we've made stuff up and blah, 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 yeah, to a degree, but then there's consequence. And as much as we all want to believe that we can have abundance, the consequences in real reality are showing us we cannot.
But to pause this for a second,
yeah.
Just because something is a construct doesn't mean it's not a reality.
Exactly.
Constructs are real because they are the way we behave. They're just malleable.
Yeah.
And that's what we talk about when you say that you create your reality. We're talking about the social constructs that we've created as people, as with our beliefs and our values and how we behave with one another.
And you can think of it as like
reality that is like very tangible,
Yeah. And you can think of it too, like a construct that is not true means we're being told if we do X, we're going to get Y. And we're expecting Y, but in real reality, we get Z. And then we're all like, what? Right? Because that's where I would say that's when we're disconnected from reality. When we're saying, I'm going to do this thing and it's going to give me this result. and then it gives us a different result, and we don't adjust our worldview to say, oh no, that's not actually true.
Sanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's delusion. Like when you refuse to acknowledge reality in front of us, we are engaging in self-delusion.
So that's
what all the spiritual people be doing.
That's right. And that's what the system is. It's a lot of, if we just do this, you will get this, but you don't get this. You get this. And that's why it's delusional. So we're almost out of time here. So I just want to kind of wrap this up. So with all of this information, what we're really saying is, I think there's enough evidence that there is enough for most of us to have enough. There is enough for most of us to have enough. And if we can start to do that inner work of figuring out how we actually feel, figuring out what we actually want, what we actually value, and to do the hard, scary work of becoming real humans who are connected to our vulnerability, who are connected to our, not our facade of being perfect, because I think that's another thing too, right? Like, just a quick little tangent here, is the reason it all looks so big and shiny, right? The reason we all present these perfect images of ourselves, and that the reason that's so accepted, is because we are a human species who is terrified of our vulnerability. We are terrified of the fact that we don't have perfect control and that we're vulnerable. And so we celebrate people who look like they're invulnerable, who look like they have perfect lives and everything is great and they have no pain and they're not suffering, because we want to believe that that's true and we can get there someday. And so much of spirituality is teaching us that if you do this and you do this and you do this, you can transcend the human experience. And so deconstructing this whole thing is deconstructing that we can have a perfect life where we never have pain and we never struggle and we never suffer again. And coming to the reality of our vulnerability, and then understanding that that is how we are going to understand what our needs are and be able to get them met, and how we're going to be able to establish real connection, which is what we actually all want when we're going for wealth. And then to understand that if we create a system where we find our enough and then we don't take any more than that, we can start to create a world where more people can have enough. So we're not saying just be happy with nothing, just be poor and like don't worry about it because that's not what makes you happy. It's like, no, we want to have a certain level of safety and access to things that make us feel safe and that get our needs met. And we need money for that. We need, you know, to produce. We need to consume. We have to have systems. But we don't have to go for more than that in hopes that going for more than that is going to satisfy needs that it cannot satisfy, which is that need for connection, that need for things that we do in our lives out for enjoyment. And, you know, like all of this being our purpose. Of like your whole life is your purpose. How you brush your teeth is your purpose. Like it's how do you live your life? How do you find that balance of the life wheel of all the parts of your life? And then we can see, okay, when the spiritual people sell me that abundance is the answer to everything, I see what they're really saying and that's not what it is. And so this spiritual way of doing this is to say, I'm going to accept my human vulnerability, and I'm going to accept my humanity, that there's greatness in all of us and there's weakness in all of us, and that we just want to be connected. But in order to have...
That's so, like, spirituality, pop spirituality now it's very disembodied from the human experience.
Exactly.
Like, that whole, like, the whole purpose of it is to sort of, like, dissociate you from your human experience, rather than recognize that you are a human having a human experience.
And it's,
Um,
yeah, it robs us of being able to have an actually good life. Because I promise you, being able to sit with and be with your pain and your vulnerability, as shitty as that can be sometimes, it opens the door to also being able to be with your greatness and your happiness and the simple pleasures of life. And all, like, it's almost like, right, when you're numb to the pain, you're also numb to all the good stuff. And so modern spirituality is doing us such a disservice in that it's not giving us tools to be with the human experience, which means everything's always going to feel hollow and numb. And we're always going to feel like a hungry ghost that's searching for more. And then the world is going to sell it to you as, yeah, keep searching for more in your consumption and your production, because that's all you are. And then it's just the snake that eats its own tail that goes on forever. So we need to reconnect with our humanity. And that's going to be how we figure out what real spirituality is, what real abundance is, and how we're going to actually dismantle these systems. Because right now, our systems are anti-humane. They're anti-emotion, they're anti-feeling, they're anti-connection. It's all about consumption and production, like make yourself a machine. And so if the spirituality world is selling you that, you've got to understand that it's the machine, it's not spirituality, right?
mm-hmm.
So do you have any final thoughts of what you would like to leave people with?
Anyway, I think we've covered it pretty in depth.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I think just at the end of the day, we need to start to say, okay, we're all going to be scared into being tricked into valuing things that don't have value. And we need to really be asking ourselves why we're so going for what we're going for and who it serves. Like, sometimes if it's like, I don't know how I feel, I don't know what I want, I don't know what I need, I don't know what I value, start with, where does what you're doing, who does it serve? Right? Who is being served by this? Is it really the community of people that you exist in? Or is it someone or something else? Like, just start there. And ask yourself, how disconnected from my humanity do I need to be in order to seek what I'm seeking, or to seek what I'm being told to seek? How disconnected from my empathy for others and my empathy for myself do I need to be to follow the advice of the spiritual people? And is that really what I want to be doing?
Yeah, I think that it really does. It all boils back down to empathy.
Yeah.
So much of it is, you can't be empathic if you're disembodied.
Yeah.
Because you can't put yourself in somebody else's emotional shoes if you're not feeling your own emotions.
Right. Exactly. And if we don't have emotions, we don't have anything, because logic can make anything make sense. Like, that's what we need to understand about being disembodied, is that our brains can make up a reason for why anything is real.
Well, that's the thing. Like, and I always say this, like, humans are rational creatures, not logical creatures. Like, logic is very, like, if this, then that type thing.
Yeah.
And it's a system, but rationalizing something is an entirely different thing. You can just, like, you can rationalize that.
Yeah.
Whether
exactly.
it makes sense, especially if you're using faulty logic, like we were talking about earlier, or logical fallacies.
Yeah, but we can't make something that's harmful feel good. Like, we can't make it feel good. It might feel good in the moment, it might be exciting or stimulating or numbing, but long term, those feelings are always going to be there. And that's really,
gaslight themselves out of it too. Like, they actually dissociate so that they don't have to.
That's right.
Acknowledge that that thing is painful.
Yeah, and that's where I would say,
stories in their head about anything that justifies it. For example, this was just part of my soul contract. Yes.
Yeah. And that's how we have no empathy for others. That's just a part of their soul contract.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, I don't have to feel
away suffering so that I don't have to acknowledge that I'm in pain, and that this
Yeah.
didn't have to happen to me, and
Yeah.
that things that can be done to make sure that it doesn't happen to anybody else.
That's right. Exactly. We need to reconnect with our empathy. That is the bottom line. Our empathy for ourselves and our empathy for others. And then a lot of this is going to be a lot more clear. Right? Yeah. All right. So that was awesome. Thank you so much. Where can people find you? Just one more.
You can find me on Instagram at Ash Rising, and my website is inmysacredspace.com.
Perfect. And yeah, you're going to be coming out with new offerings here pretty quick?
Yeah, we're, myself and a collaborator are putting together an ethical entrepreneurship course that we're going to launch pretty soon. It is really in depth. It's sort of like a 101 type thing, but it's not fluff by any means. It's like, it's probably going to be about a 10-hour course.
Yeah.
And like she's got 2 master's degrees in sociology and like applied psychology.
Yeah.
Is in marketing business. So this thing is like, it's legit. It's going to be great. I'm really excited.
Yeah. Fantastic. Awesome. So yeah, definitely go follow Ash, go follow all of her programs. And if you're interested more in the connecting to your humanity self-love path, I've got my mystery school. It's a 3-year curriculum. I think there's like over 300 videos in there. It is also not fluff, because this work is deep. Like to deprogram ourselves from all of this, it takes a lot. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you later. Thanks. Bye.